Hello, welcome to part 2 of our Lars Basics Guide. Reminder that this is game version 4.2. In this part, we're going to talk more about strategy and go over some basic game plan elements which will build on the essential tools we already went over. We'll also suggest some additional players to check out and cap it off with a brief character summary. Don't forget about all the resource links I mentioned in part 1. Those may be very useful to you, especially if you are brand new to the game. I've included those once again in the video description below. Enough of that, let's get going. First important thing to know with Lars is that he's not a frame oppressive character. Aside from running 3, he doesn't have any easy to use big plus on block moves from neutral. Best you can hope for is 0 or +1 on block with things like down 2. Even on hit, his lows somewhat follow this pattern. Forward 4-3 is only +3 on hit, forward 3+4 is 0, down back 1-3 down is only +1, down back 1-3 is -1. Your best option there in terms of frames is down back 4, which is +5. Although that's good, it's hardly oppressive, particularly given how risky the move is. Instead, Lars is made up of great pokes, so his strength is to stick and move and stay safe. Basically everything we mentioned in essential moves can be used as a sidestep or backdash setup, or even a counter hit setup if they're using slower moves. Think jabs, down forward 1, down back 2 and down back 2-1, down 4, back 2, down forward 2, forward 1-2, and even some slower moves like down back 4 and down 2. The list of moves he has for this style of gameplay really is huge, and he also doesn't have to take a lot of risk since he has plenty of safe general utility tools like back 1, which is homing, up forward 4, which is a low crush, and down forward 4, which is a long range safety poke. So Lars is built around safely poking or making similarly safe reads and then simply moving around to find a punish opportunity. It's not a complex style, but it is remarkably effective and one of the reasons he's an easier character to learn. For whiffs, you're obviously going to be hunting for your launchers. Forward 1+2 is the easy common option, but it does have some range issues. Forward back 2-1 is better for range, and although it is technically faster at I-14, the forward back input can be tricky, so be prepared ahead of time to use it. It's also much riskier at -18, so keep that in mind too. Since you can buffer the forward input, it does give him a legit launcher at 14 frames. You'll just have to practice it some, since again, that input can be tricky to do on the fly. Up forward 3 is another option, again riskier than forward 1+2, and it has some range issues too, but the range is a little farther than forward 1+2 and it's still fast at I-16. For longer ranges, keep back 3-4 in mind, especially at the wall, since it'll give you more damage from the splat than your launchers will. Beyond that, because pokes by their nature have quick recovery, you're going to find lots of opportunities to snag counter hits. It's worth mentioning that most of Lars's launchers actually don't require counter hits to launch, but can still be useful as counter hit tools. We already noted forward 1+2 and up forward 3, forward 1+2 mostly because of speed, but up forward 3 can beat highs and lows. Down forward 2-1 is another quick mid-mid launcher, no counter hit required. Orbitals are always awesome, especially if your opponent is getting too obvious with lows, but Lars's has really good range, so it's nice for sniffing out whiffs at range without the block or duck risk of forward back 2-1 or back 3-4. For moves that require actual counter hits, you have a few launchers locked behind strings that are good for giving you back initiative. Think back 2-1, 2-1-3, forward 1-2-3, or while standing 2-1. 1-1-1 is also really good since it's I-10 and will give you a big damage wall combo. It is risky on block, but note that the counter hit is only necessary to get the first 2 jabs to combo. The second and third hits are already a natural combo, and since 1-1 is high mid, it's extremely good at catching people ducking or trying to punish a whiff jab. So note that 1-1 jails, so for this to be effective, your 1 jab needs to whiff. It's not a tool to catch people ducking after blocking a single jab. Regardless, if you're trying to get some block pressure going, the scare factor of these strings is how you're going to do it. But as you can see, all these come with considerable risk, so it's not wise to rely on them unless your opponent is playing really wild. We should also quickly mention his full crouch game for counter hits, since he has a really good, safe, quick counter hit launcher in full crouch down forward 2. It also has decent range for what it is, tracks to his left, and gives okay damage on normal hit along with +5. The problem is of course that it's a full crouch move. It is worth practicing instant full crouch down forward 2 to try to bring this into play in the neutral. Instant full crouch is just a timing thing, so press down forward, wait a moment, then press 2. Otherwise you can try to hunt for it after something like down 2 down on hit, which is +8, but moves that set you up with that much advantage are pretty rare for Lars. Crouch jab and maybe down back 4 being the other two most common options. It's probably going to be easier just to try to hit it by raw ducking and trying to make the read. But that will keep opponents on their toes since the move is fast enough to deter people trying to confirm your duck and then punish you for it. It's far more likely that you'll get the counter hit as they try to come in for the punish. It also gives you a safe counter hit launch attempt if you're playing against a character with lots of highs in their strings. Think Wrong. The only other counter hit tools worth mentioning are actually part of his approach and stance game, so let's chat about that a little bit. We'll start by talking about DE since you can't do send from neutral, but for DE it is simply forward 3. You can tap forward from DE to go to send, but as you can imagine it's not a quick transition. So first let's talk about your DE options. DE1 is your fastest option, a safe high I11 elbow, works very much like a jab, although a big +8 on hit, and you can go to send by tapping forward, which is still +6 on hit. DE1-2 is a safe knockdown splatting natural combo option, but it can be ducked, so be careful with it. DE1+2 is also a high, only -10 and nearly as fast at I12, and it's a normal hit launcher. Thanks to the ducking frames of DE, you'll find this is pretty easy to sneak under jabs and such, and because it's fast, it's good for nabbing counter hits against people trying to check your DE on reaction from range. Overall, it's a great move. When they start to slow down a bit, DE2 is a solid safe mid counter hit launcher, still chunky damage on normal hit along with a +7, extremely good on Oki since it hits grounded, so you'll see it a lot for that purpose. DE43 is the exact same move as forward 4-3 if you want to low to try to crack their defensive shell. You don't have a true mix up to this from DE, although DE2 is probably the best mid option since it's only a couple frames faster, but DE stays active for a while, so simply delaying it slightly can serve as that mix up. Final note on DE43, one of your rage drives is a beefed up version of it. It replaces the second hit with what is essentially your orbital, which causes a ground stun that allows a free ground hit. If the second hit connects by itself, it is a launcher, so they do have to be careful with punishing it, although it is -13 on block. The string jails though, so you don't have to worry about the big block stun on the low, turning it into a -13 knockdown low string, which is strong. Since we mentioned lack of pressure tools earlier, you actually do have a decent one with DE3, which is +6 on block, knockdown wall bounce on hit, great linear range, but can be stepped easily, and since it's slow, that's a real concern. Generally speaking, DE moves can be stepped one way or the other, however the sheer speed of DE1 and 1+2 can typically help prevent stepping. DE1+2 also has decent tracking both ways, especially to the right. And although unusual for a stance, you'll normally want to use DE from neutral since most of the DE moves are pretty fast. You only have a couple of DE transitions to begin with, and they come with considerable risk on block, so it's much better to simply threaten with it when you're at range a little bit as a quick way to get in or on Oki. And for fun, note that you can cancel DE with down, so if they're really turtled up, you can add that scare factor by doing forward 3 down forward 3 repeatedly. Send, on the other hand, can only be done as a transition, so you have to get a little creative with it. First, your send options. Send 1 is a power mid, knockdown wall bouncer, and his fastest option at I12. However, it is -10, so it can be jab punished. As a quick aside, Lars' other rage drive is a beefed up version of this. Instead of being punishable, it turns it into a +9 on block normal hit launcher. The only complicated thing about it is that it automatically goes to DE, so whatever you plan to do with it will have to involve DE. Otherwise, you'll often see send 3+4 more since it's a truly safe mid-mid natural combo that's only slightly slower at I13. Since it gives the spin on hit, you get big plus frames in the open and it can still splat at the wall. And it low crushes for people getting cute with toe kicks or crouch jabs. Then you have two different mids that you can use at I14. Send 3 is your normal hit launch option, but also -14 on block. Send down forward 1 is safe, does chunky damage, big +8 on hit, and a counter hit launch. Probably most notably is that it's 0 on block and forces crouch. This is a really common setup tool for 1-1-1 since your one jab will beat your typical while standing moves that don't stay crouching. Few characters have a quick while standing one, so this will especially work against players that don't know it forces crouch and try to mash out with their own jabs. But that threat helps you slow them down or set them up for something bigger like a sidestep. Moving on, Send 2 is your low threat, only -12 on block, +5 on hit, and a counter hit hit launch, so a lot to love there. The big problem is speed. Not only is it I-19, but it's locked behind a stance that requires a transition, meaning you can't really hide it well. Instead, you'll be leaning hard on the high crush property to try to nab that counter hit. You can try to delay one of your send mids, but the send window doesn't last as long as DE does, so it's a bit tougher to accomplish. But this element whereby it's easy for opponents to see send activating leads us to our last send move, send 4, which is a safe, homing power crush launcher, so it's a way to stop challenges and stepping. It is high though, and roughly the same speed as send 2, so it suffers from the same speed issues. But since you have both a high and low crush from send 4 helps prevent mid checks against your send transitions. There aren't a huge number of transitions, but the vast majority of them are pokes with good frames, making them decent entries into send. These include forward 2-1, forward 1-2, down back 2 forward, back 3 forward, and while standing 2 forward. These all give different advantage on hit, but on block they're all -5. At -5, send 4 will beat basically any higher mid that isn't a crouch jab. Since send is considered a crouching state from the start, send 2 will beat any high in that situation as well. And send 3+4 is mostly the same, but for lows. Crouch jabs are fast enough to stop it, however, if they're even slightly late, it'll still win. The main thing to keep in mind with send is that you have options to get there, but if your opponent has any Lars experience, they'll be able to see it coming, so you really have to be dialed into how they defend against it to put it to good use. But finally, on the topic of use, let's chat about approach, because both DE and send can be used for that purpose. DE alone moves you forward about 2.5 units. The longest DE move, DE3, has about that same range, meaning if you're within 5 units of your opponent, DE3 can reach. If you do the send transition from DE, that adds roughly another 2 units or so of range. Since the second hit of send 3+4 hits late and farther out, doing DE to send 3+4 literally goes full screen. Point being, as Lars, you're always in range, but even outside of DE and send, your approach tools are silly good and not super complicated. If you want, you can simply stick to your forward moves and you have a full kit to work with for approach. Forward 4-3 would be your big low threat. Forward 4-2 is your mid launch option, same exact speed as forward 4. Forward 1+2 is your super long range mid check that's incredibly dangerous with the counter hit launch and a good way to stop side steps. Forward 3+4 is an alternative low threat, so you have 2, which is nice, and running 3 is your pressure tool. So getting in is simply not an issue for Lars. As always, we'll start by recommending Applay. It's the best quick info resource out there. Once you start to get comfortable with Tekken and you want to pick up a character on the fly, there's nothing better than this. So first, a Russian player. Plenty of matches out there of LmgMob since he's been involved in some pretty high profile stuff, including winning EVO 2021 East region. I think most consider him the premier Lars currently. Next, hailing from Detroit, USA, L-Train Locomotive is certainly the most well-known US Lars player, plenty of matches and streams to find, and he also did a Teach Me with King J, so you can hear from him directly his thoughts on Lars. Lastly, an incredibly strong Philippines player, Doujin also has a Teach Me with King J, plenty of matches out there, and he's one of the unusual streamers in that he streams on Facebook Gaming, but given the Philippines' proximity to Korea, he has lots of sets out there with high-profile Korean players to check out. And as usual, don't take this list as final. Lars is a popular character, so this list is just to get you started, so search around and you'll find more. This brings us to the end of our guide. Lars is a character that thrives on his safe pokes and then, when necessary, can opt to go for a risky but evasive and rewarding move. But his pokes are going to set you up well for both counter hits and whiff punishes. Generally speaking, Lars can be played incredibly safe. However, to really open someone up, he's going to have to take some risk with his lows, which are either incredibly bad on block or reactable. Still, his damage and safety can normally carry the day for you with a dash of flash from his 2 stances. So keep at it, and I wish you the best of luck in your training. And with that, thanks for checking out this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications here on YouTube so that you get alerted when a new video drops. Twitch and Twitter links are also down below. Lastly, huge thank you to our patrons. The more support we have, the more resources we can devote to channel content. So again, I can't thank everyone enough for considering supporting the Patreon. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.